Hi everyone, I'm Cheryl Duffy. I'm from the Divorce Centre. I'm a divorce coach, a conflict coach, a advanced mediator, a family dispute resolution practitioner, and parenting coordinator. And I'm here in Sydney, Australia, and I have a wonderful guest today, all the way from North Carolina. It's Al Huntoon, who is a co-parenting conflict specialist. He's also the author of Co-Parenting Compass and Your Co-Parenting Co-Pilot for use with AI for people who want to have the help of AI going through their challenges. So Al has been working with lots of clients over his years as a social worker in custody mediation in the local district court, and he does mediation with people from all backgrounds, and also doing co-parenting coaching, particularly for high conflict couples, ones that are starting out in separation, but throughout the whole journey as well. So Al is here today to talk to us more about asymmetric conflict. So Al, would you like to explain what asymmetric co-parenting conflict is?
Sure. Well, first of all, I just want to say thanks for hosting me today. I really appreciate it and having the conversation and to be able to talk about this subject, which is really close to my heart. Basically, it's a framework for thinking about co-parenting conflict, which which helps in high conflict situations. So, high conflict with custody is kind of well trodden path in with custody and family courts. People have been thinking about it for a long time because they see it. And those are the cases that come to court are the high conflict ones. They they can't settle through mediation. They don't settle through a negotiation process with attorneys. And so those are the cases that wind up in the courtroom. One of the issues with that is that it's not a very discerning approach to how the conflict originates, what are the underlying dynamics of the co-parenting conflict. And so for a significant percentage of people engaging in that conflict, one of the parents is driving the conflict. And the other parent is responding defensively or protectively. So one of the parents is driving the conflict for various reasons, but the what happens is, and if you think about any kind of conflict, someone is attacking and the other person's defending. And if you came along and you just saw the two people, you would think that the conflict was mutual. Um, and that's what happens so often. So what what I have been really promoting is a more discerning look at high conflict. And it isn't necessarily just the conflict that comes to court. It can be all kinds of conflict that happens between co-parents after court, after the case is litigated or settled through negotiation or mediation. Often the conflict's ongoing because the dynamics of the conflict weren't really addressed by the mediation or the negotiation or the litigation process. So the parents have some ground rules that don't necessarily work for the fullness of their situation. And so people find other ways to keep driving conflict. And I've seen this with my clients. They're typically in high conflict situations, sometimes before the case, is before the court, before there's a separation agreement or a custody order, and oftentimes after. one of the parties will find ways. They'll exploit ambiguity in the custody order or the separation agreement or the parenting agreement, whatever it's called, right? It could be an order of the court, or it could be part of, the divorce process in a separation agreement. Um, so that's something that I've seen in practice. I saw it as a custody mediator for the local district court, and I work with people as a coach now. So that's the basic framework that I've been developing.
Yeah. I see that the conflict, as you say, is being driven by one particular person generally. And this can be at the start of the separation. And if it doesn't get sort of stamped out, or the couple receive the emotional support required at the onset of separation, it can prolong all the way through and actually be escalating further as they're going through their separation journey through that legal pathway. I find that people will rush out and get lawyers, they lawyer up, and the adversarial battle begins. So I feel that there's a lot of benefit in being able to have emotional support to be able to de-escalate right at the beginning, and try to have families have the coaching that they need to be able to keep bringing it back to what's best for the children rather than what's best for themselves as a parent. So in our situation over here in Australia, there's a lot of concern with domestic violence, of course. As we've seen, there's like one woman per week who is dying in their intimate partner relationship, which is horrific. But there's also this concern that this conflict now, the legal people are really worried about, protecting everybody, even if they feel there's a slight risk of escalation into conflict that's going to escalate into a horrific result, harm to somebody, either the other parent or to the children. So often that we're seeing this conflict, and so as professionals, we're seeing that there's a lot of sort of assessments being done just to ensure that everybody is safe going through the process of mediation or going through the court system. But there are people who are withholding children where there are no safety issues, or there are situations where conflict is being exacerbated or created to be able to get the violence order as well, to be able to have that leverage in the legal system. So that's what I'm seeing here when I'm dealing with different clients. It's about trying to assess, as you say, is if the conflict is going to be something that is going to bring harm to a family, or whether it's going to be something that can be supported. Their emotional dysregulation can be helped in being able to help them get to a point where they can go to mediation and actually be looking at their proposals, their exploration of issues in a calm and manner that is going to be looking after the interests of the family. So you're wanting to ensure that the family, or particularly the children, continue to have relationships with each parent where it's safe to do so. So the problem being is we need to help them get through that separation journey without fueling more conflict in the process, but making sure that we're helping them de-escalate that conflict.
Well, I have an example of that, which I had a client recently, and there was some physical violence at the end of the marriage, right before, well, not the end of the marriage, but right before the separation. and there was a domestic violence protective order. And so there were, provisions to keep the survivor safe. And so, the very straightforward common sense things to keep the parents separated. But there were two children, and there was a custody portion. I don't know how it works in Australia, but here in North Carolina, there can be a custody portion when there are children involved. And there were two attorneys representing each of the parties. And what they said in the custody portion was that the custody should be as the parents agree. Well, that frankly is very foolish.
Yeah.
Because it didn't recognize the high level of conflict, right, between the two. So one of the parents, the protected party, ended up withholding the children. There was nothing in the protective order that said that the party could withhold the children, but since it said the parents have to agree, the protected party never agreed.
Yeah.
And so that's an example, I think, of the kind of thing you're talking about. And I know in the local district where I work, the family court judges don't like that. When the case comes to court for custody, it has to go through mediation first. If that doesn't work, if it comes to court for custody, they're not going to like the fact that even though the protected party in the domestic violence protective order, but the intent was not for that party to withhold the children. So that's something I think that those were attorneys who did. Each party had their own attorney. It wasn't that one of the parties was pro se. And I told my client that the attorney did not think it through, right? And that's, I think, is so important for people in that situation to think through the best interests of the children and, have the children, are the children safe and under what conditions should they be with both parents, rather than kind of rushing through it, because it can get in front of a judge very quickly. And so I think it's a very sensitive issue. On the one hand, people are murdered, and sometimes children are harmed, and when I was a mediator, one of the cases that we had, when the mother came to mediation, the court ordered mediation, the father killed the maternal grandparents, the children, and himself.
Gosh,
So that's part of the issue, is it's the stakes can be so high. But then on the other hand, then, I think because the stakes are so high in some cases, then on the other hand, on the other end of the scale, there's not enough attention paid to that kind of conflict. What will work best for the children in that case? So it's a very difficult issue to approach, and I think I wish more people in the whole, what I think of as the ecosystem of the family court system, were more educated on different approaches to domestic violence.
Yeah. Because
It's a
we also
difficult
need
issue.
to look at domestic violence is generally a pattern of behavior throughout the whole relationship. So I think there's not enough in-depth sort of exploration on the relationship and how the conflict occurred and how it was managed through the relationship itself. Because domestic violence is more than just the physical violence, but there's financial abuse, there's, the emotional and psychological abuse. But then there's needing to sort of be, well, what are we going to be sort of saying is not going to be in the best interests of the children, not seeing a parent because there's financial abuse, or is that going to be something that is going to be looked at, or is it going to be just purely if there is identification, there's a possible risk of physical fear of some sort of harm coming to a child, rather than some, parents have been sort of possibly in a situation throughout the relationship where they will have had arguments that the child will have witnessed. That's quite normal in a relationship that arguments do ensue, but it's a case of assessing what is a real risk. And I think we've come to the point where it's far easier for authorities to say, oh, well, we'll just go on the of caution and be able to sort of keep the children away from the father. It's sort of like we've branded that, the fathers are guilty until proven innocent type of thing. So I think sometimes we forget that, the way that our families have evolved over time, where fathers are more hands-on, and the parents can be quite interchangeable in their care of the children. It's about looking at the family dynamics, the pattern of the care of the children pre-separation, and also looking at the conflict that has ensued, and the conflict in regards to the physical or emotional conflict that's inflicted on the children, or whether it's just inflicted on the other party. Not diminishing the importance of there being no domestic violence, but trying to sort of do the assessment so that you are not tarring everyone with the same brush, and just doing a sweep of, okay, well, just to make sure that we don't make a mistake and something happens on our watch, we're going to just make sure that we keep the children apart from the other loving parent.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a difficult issue, and I think because the children are involved, it would be helpful to have that extra step of assessing it more deeply. That is typically not typically, it's never been my focus in coaching with people. There's never been domestic violence protective order that prevented a parent from spending time with the children. That's too complex for me. And the example that I cited is pretty rare. The parent was pretty desperate. My client was pretty desperate to spend time with the children, and we were strategizing around that. Basically, one of the things that you had mentioned, preparing for mediation. And so, but usually I work with people where the conflict is more subtle. There's coercive control, certainly, but the parents are separated. There's not clear, kind of economic control. There's no physical harm, but there can be, psychological, emotional leverage, coercive control, harassment sometimes. And so, then my focus is on, helping the parent approach that. And there's two things I've emphasized over the years. There's two things that I think are really important, and I try to boil it down to something simple. The first thing is emotional literacy, or emotional intelligence, some people call it, so that you're better able to manage your responses. And people have all kinds of little techniques that go along with that, like pausing before you respond, things like that. But in general, the most important thing that people can do is understand their emotional response and manage that, so that they're, basically, one of the strongest emotion that people are experiencing that rarely gets talked about is fear.
Sure.
That is something that is driving all kinds of secondary emotions: anger, resentment, grief. It all comes down to fear.
Yeah.
And so understanding that, if you're responding from a place of fear, you're not going to have the best response. You need to respond from a place of strategy. And that's the second thing, to be very intentional, to really think about what you want to achieve in your co-parenting relationship when you are co-parenting with a very difficult, you know, co-parenting, the parent. So those are the two things that it comes down to for people. And those are the two things that I help people with. I always try to bring it back to, their emotional management, um, discipline, self-discipline, self-care, and, really cultivating their best self. Because when they come from a place of fear, they're coming from really a place of vulnerability, but they want to be their best self for your children, and that's what I urge people to think about. Not, you have a response that comes out of fear or a secondary emotion like anger or, sadness. Um, or do you want to come from your best self, which is a place of intention and, and being grounded? So those two things are the things that I focus on with my clients.
Yeah, it's very important for a parent to make sure that they're not reacting to what the other parent is doing, because that then just makes them almost as bad as the perpetrator, because then their behaviors are seen as being sort of similar to what the perpetrator's doing. So if you can make sure that you're squeaky clean in making sure that you're not reacting, that you're responding, so you're understanding your own triggers, you have that self-awareness of what does make you have your hot buttons pushed, and they can be pushed from the other parent from a place of keeping themselves safe, but sometimes they can be pushed on purpose to get a reaction out of you. So you want to also make sure that you're being that role model to your child, because we have to remember that pre-separation, how we were teaching our children to be kind, to be tolerant, to be compassionate, to be, caring, are key things that we were instilling in our children. And all of a sudden, it comes to separation, and parents may be acting in a very poor way towards each other, very disrespectful, and saying mean things to each other. That is something that the children become quite confused with and saddened that their parents have resorted to becoming, sparring partners. So it's really important that even if one of the other parents denigrates you and says bad things to you or through the children about you, it's important to not react to that, particularly to the child, when they're telling you that, oh, mom or dad said this about you. It's about being calm and just sort of, well, that's not a very nice thing to say, is it? And then just change the subject, because it's about not dwelling in that moment and giving it airtime and buying into that drama that's trying to be provoked by the other parent to get you to react, so that the child is seeing you in a bad light. Always have your child seeing you in a good light, that you're being the one that is being kind and caring, even amidst these challenges, because you're actually role modeling to children how to deal with conflict into the future, how to deal with major challenges and trauma that's occurring, in a mature and emotionally intelligent way, to get through that without losing your cool, without ending up with a violence order against you because you've been triggered and you've gone and done something that has now got you into trouble. So it is about making sure that you are coming from a space of your best self, because your children don't want to come to your house if you're crying all over the place, if you're saying, oh, the other parent's being so mean to me, the other parent's done this or the other parent's done that. So even from that defensive side, you can't try to enlist your child as your emotional support person. It's not their role. You need to seek that support from a professional. But when you do have time with your children, it's very important to make sure that you're being a calm and a person who's trying to enjoy the time that you have with the child, and try to switch off, compartmentalize that time as being a special time and not to be wasted on attacking the other parent or talking badly about the other parent. So it's about having that time as that precious time with the child and make it enjoyable for them, because the child won't want to come back to your place if they feel a lot of emotional pressure from you.
Yeah, definitely. Children are little sponges. They take their cues from parents, and I think sometimes we forget that for children, the world can be scary and confusing, and so it isn't just what you tell your children; it's what you show your children. And if you can show them that you're grounded and clear and present for them, that will make a huge difference. That if you're emotionally reactive, if you're stirred up because you have this really challenging relationship with your co-parent, you're having difficulty managing that, that's going to spill over into your relationship with your children.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that is crucially important to realize, is that it's it, there's a real value to being able to role model for your children that groundedness, the emotional maturity and intelligence.
Yeah. I think it's really important to try not to buy into the drama, because that is going to just continue along that pathway toward the court system. So if at the beginning you're able to get the support that you need from a divorce coach, a co-parenting coach, conflict coach, or even a counselor or a psychologist, it's about trying to get that emotional support up front to help you. But people that specialize in the divorce space, the separation space, does help you be able to work on different scenarios that you're experiencing, so that we can coach you to take a different pathway to get a different outcome, so that you're always making sure that you're not going spiraling into that adversarial pit, where you're going to end up in court. And this is a situation where I think we don't give enough emotional support to families to help them through separation. And I think everyone sees it that, oh no, I've got to rush out and get a lawyer because they're going to help me get what I want. And unfortunately, the lawyer is only looking at what is best for their client. They're not looking what's best for the family, because both parties have to have their own lawyer. So they're out to sort of get the best for their client. So it's really important to make sure that they're getting the support from a holistic point of view, so that it's about the best interests of the children, to make sure that the children stay connected with both parents who love them very much. And whether the parents can't get along, you might decide to do parallel parenting for a while until you heal, because obviously you can be in different stages of the grief cycle. So therefore, you might be finding it very difficult to even interact with the other parent. So you can be working through, parallel parenting with contactless pickups and drop-offs, but just ensuring that the children do have two loving homes to be in, and to not be dragged into all this chaos and this conflict that's occurring between two parents. It's really the responsibility of the parents to stop this conflict and get the support they need, so that for their own mental health, to stop the conflict, and for their children's emotional well-being, they need to have that as their priority of, let's stop the conflict, so that we're not making the situation worse.
Well, and I think people, as you're saying, people really need support for that. Most of them haven't been through this kind of situation. And and on top of that, each situation is unique, and has its own kind of dimensions and complications. And so I think, it can be really helpful for people to have some support as they go through a difficult time. And as you said, as a social worker, I think of it as early intervention. And I have had opportunity a few times. Most of my clients are in high conflict situations, but a few times I've been able to work with people at the beginning of the separation. And I just want to note, I don't just work with people who are married. You're in the divorce center, but half of my clients were not married. They may have cohabitated and maybe not, because in our society, people don't necessarily get married to have children anymore. Um,
It's the same here.
Probably, yeah. Um, so uh, the but I have been involved a few times with people at the very beginning of the separation process, married and not, and they found it so helpful to think through all the issues and to plan for the future and to surface the conflicts or the potential conflicts early on so they can take a thoughtful approach to them.
Yeah. And bringing it back to looking through the child's lens, I often say to parents, because some of them, oh no, we can't be at the same place together. But there needs to be a view of it needs to occur one day. Your children are not going to have two weddings because you can't be in the same room together. They're not going to have two grand finals because you both can't be there together. So there needs to be a view that we need to work towards getting to the point where we can be in the same room together. So it's about, starting off possibly having the parallel parenting if the conflict's so high, but then working out how we can work towards having joint events into the future and what that might look like and what's the benefit of having those joint events for the child. Because even if you are saying, okay, well, I can stand down one end of the soccer field and you can stand down the other, don't stand anywhere near me. But then you might have your son kick the winning goal and he's in this loyalty bind of, well, who do I run to first to celebrate it with? So there does come a time where parents need to be able to be civil to each other. And the more that the conflict gets fueled by the adversarial sort of legal system because they're being pitted against each other. It's really important to have the opportunity for that emotional regulation and for that emotional sort of looking at how into the future you can actually be together at joint events, because you're not going to be partners anymore, but you're certainly still going to be parents, and you do need to be able to work together for the best interests of the children, because they're going to need you if they've got to have emergency surgery. You've got to be able to be united in the front of the children and not arguing in front of the child who's undergoing surgery. So you're needing to really have some help to be able to work together. And you've got to be able to look at, how am I going to achieve that? What do I need to do within myself to be able to be in the same room? And both parents looking at how they can, it's like being in a business and you can have a really horrible customer come in and you think, oh, I don't want to deal with this person. But you can put your mask on and say, oh, hi, Mrs. Brown, how are you today? So you can create some way of being able to detach emotionally, but be able to work together for a common goal. So it might not be a business setting, but your children certainly are your business together. So think of it like that it's got to be a situation where you're not going to be able to be separated and not have any common denominator of as having children together. Okay, if you're a de facto and you have no kids, you just do your financial settlement and you never see each other again. But this is a different scenario. You have to make it work. You have to see how you can be in the same room together eventually for the sake of your children.
Well, I think one of the issues is you mentioned parallel parenting, and I think that's helpful for a lot of people. But one of the issues is there's not really been anything in kind of in between parallel parenting and cooperative parenting. And a while back, I wrote something about what I call transactional parenting, which I think is the intermediary step where you're talking about where parallel parenting, you just can't be in the same vicinity. There's so much hostility uh, that it doesn't even have to be from both parents. One person can be so hostile that prevent them together. But I think that if the goal can be something that's more transactional, which is what happens in business settings, that's why people can put on, the professional face for the customer because they're focused on the transaction.
Yes.
And between, a business and a customer, there's a transaction that's a mutual exchange. There's a mutual benefit to each party. And I think if people can focus on that, how can move from the parallel parenting to a situation that's transactional and people are careful that there's a mutual benefit for each party, for each parent. And one of the benefits is for how the relationship is conveyed, is modeled to your children. And so that's what I think the goal should be when people start from parallel parenting, to move to something that looks more like what I think of as transactional parenting, where there is a focus. This is more almost like a professional exchange. There's a mutual exchange where each party has to get some benefit from the exchange. And I've helped people with that. Not too long ago, I worked with two parents who were referred by a parenting coordinator because they were just in such a difficult situation. And we focused on that and we came up with clarifying a bunch of their expectations about their interactions with a focus on it moving to be more transactional. And that was very helpful for them.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's been very good talking to you today, Al. There are things out there that need to be addressed to help families get through a very, very challenging time. And I think, professionals, have a duty to try and help the whole family be able to endure some form of relationship beyond separation that is going to help the children stay connected to both parents in, where it's safe to do so, of course, and really be able to help people have a calm life where their mental health is not forever in a state where they're not being able to function due to the conflict that's been happening. So it's about alleviating that conflict and getting it back to a state that can work between two loving homes, so the children are feeling as though they're not anxious about going to each parent, but actually happy going between the two parents because they're not feeling guilt. They're not feeling as though the other parent is going to want emotional support. And it's about just having both two happy homes for the kids to be able to thrive in. So I want to thank you for coming along today, Al, and wish you all the best in helping clients going forward.
Well, thank you so much for the conversation. I really appreciated it.